occupied today with some other things, but I'll do my best, and we're really in the hands of Mike anyway. So my name's Jeni De Landre. I'm the ACT Regional Agricultural Landcare Facilitator. I sit in the ACT NRM team, and I'm funded through the Australian Government Landcare Program and the ACT Government as well. So this is the second webinar of a series of webinars that we're working on and producing through the Resilient Farming Program, and a few of you, I think, were on our first webinar. So thank you for coming back, and welcome to the new participants. So just a quick little acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of Ngunnawal land that I'm meeting on, and Mary, my assistant, is meeting on, but also I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians that you are all meeting on as well. So. Now, I won't take up too much time with introductions and too much about the program, but there is, of course, a little bit of housekeeping that we need to quickly run through. So Mary is sitting opposite me, and she's going to manage the chat function, and she has also put you all on mute. So if you do want to speak at any stage when the opportunity comes up, just remember to unmute yourself. It's probably best if you keep your video off. It just helps with streaming a little bit, and possibly some embarrassing moments, and we've all sort of seen that over the last 12 months or so. So if you could put your video and mic off, we will be recording this session, and that's why, and we can send it all out to you after the webinar, and onwards anywhere further as well. So if you do want to ask a question, it's probably best if you pop it in the chat function. Mary's going to monitor those, and she'll let Mike know when there's some questions that need answering, and Mike will sort of just try and answer them as he goes, and we'll just monitor and see how that goes. If it looks like we're getting, overloaded with questions, we might have to change tack. But it's very much a very open discussion webinar as well today. Now, this webinar is it's not in relation to the IPCC report that was handed down yesterday, but so don't expect us to be looking into that and addressing anything that came out of that today. It's not that. What else? Have I forgotten anything, Mary? No. Well, it's probably best if I mute myself and turn my camera off, and we can hand over to Mike, if you like.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jeni. I'll start sharing my content, and if you can just give me the thumbs up once you see that coming through. Well, thanks for having me today. A little bit about myself. I'm obviously from the Bureau. I've had about 15 years experience working for the Bureau in various functions, right back to when I was initially posted out at Moree Met Office. So yeah, that gave me a great introduction of just how critical the ag sector finds Bureau products and services. And I think also it gives us, certainly gives me a great opportunity just to reflect on how far we've come. If I think back to 2005 when I was doing radio crosses to the local listening audience, and we were talking about probability of day 3 and 4 rainfall, and now we're our customers are sort of demanding and really asking about days sort of 7, 8, 9, and into that sort of multi-week forecasting. So the progress of science continues to help us all out, and today's really just about introducing or reintroducing you to a lot of products and services that you may already be familiar with. It might just give me an opportunity to dig a little deeper in there for you. And please, no questions too silly today. So if you see me on a particular bureau product or discussing sort of a locality or talking about, a piece of terminology that you just want some more information, please, ask the question. It will help me understand where your pain points are, and just be really good feedback on where we're all up to. So I'll just drop my camera off so I can swing to my second screen. Okay, so just for a bit of overview, the Bureau, being Australian government service, we've sort of come up with a strategy that in particular identified that the products and services needed to benefit the Australian community and drive competitive advantage for businesses and industries. So we've been really, I guess, impressed at how some of the really important industries have engaged with us over the last 4 years. And I know that sort of as we sort of are drawing up our strategy to go beyond 2022, there's going to be more of that engagement between our partners. So I just put that up there because myself, as part of the Bureau's agriculture program, it is in our strategy to reach out, listen to what, the customers and those on the ground need from the Bureau. Specifically with the agriculture program, we've been tasked with creating a quantifiable amount of value within the ag sector. And that's not just us, taking contracts and writing invoices for products and services we deliver. That's about creating value. So we're doing some really interesting work with the northern beef industry, for example, and they've got some really key objectives that they've been able to put a dollar value on. So it just helps us work with our partners to achieve an outcome. I'll be talking about different timescales today. So a lot of you are very familiar with the observation network out there. I'm sure you're looking at radars sort of every other day. There's the Bureau's forecast. We've got the seasonal outlooks, and I'll also introduce a product that will help with resilience within the climate that you work with in those sort of future years. So I guess that's my way of saying we're working across all timescales, and we're looking to really integrate how we do that, from the day-to-day to the week, the multi-week planning, and that sort of those out years as well. I'll run through some of the products that I hope sort of you're getting more and more familiar with, and I will change my screen view from time to time. I prepared this last week, but I'd love to actually go in and show you what it's looking like today. It's actually really good timing. We've got the passage of the front coming through your region, I think, Wednesday afternoon. So that will just give us a really good, tangible example of how to interpret, forecasts, where to get some more detailed analysis of what's happening. So I start with the landscape water balance, because that's a product that is now updated in close to real time, and it gives you a really good understanding of your current soil moisture, runoff, things like that. And also what we found as we've been sort of talking around the country is how producers are also using this information to assess other markets that may not be in their immediate area. Med-Eye, I'd love to sort of, if I was in a room now, I'd sort of really sort of ask you, how many of you are familiar with Med-Eye? Put your hands up if you've looked at it in the last 7 days. Really try to get a flavour. I'm sure we're all a bit over Zoom and Microsoft Teams calls in 2021, but it's what we're stuck with. But the thing with Med-Eye, it's been designed, and I don't think everybody quite understands this. It's direct output from the Bureau's official forecast, but it's right down to a more accurate level for the individual user. So, if I go to an examples in Northern Australia where people have such large land holdings, it means that you're sort of essentially down to that paddock accuracy. So if I'm just going to swing over to for people who aren't familiar how to get to Met-Eye, hopefully you're familiar with the Bureau's homepage, and I understand that as the mobile apps become more popular, people may not necessarily be coming back to this on a daily basis. But in order to get to Meti, which is a product that we do encourage the agriculture sector to use, it's as simple as scrolling down towards the bottom, and we've got the Meti icon, and then you can just type in your locality. You could put your lat long in, or you could sort of put your locality. So I'll bring up Tharwa. And so this just straight away gives us a 7-day outlook. And then if I click on the text views for location, we then go into a much deeper view that will give us a lot more detail. So if we look at Wednesday in particular, when this the passage of the front moves through, we're seeing possible rainfall 5 to 10 mils. And then we've got this 80% figure. And what's been interesting as well as we've gone around the country recently is just a bit of misunderstanding about what all those numbers mean. So, please hit me up for questions later. But for this particular example, Wednesday, we're saying the 80% refers to any rain. So by any rain, if we consider that 0.2 of a millimetre or more. So there's 80% chance that there will be any rain. It's not 80% chance of between 5 and 10 mils. The 5 mils actually refers to the 50 percentile grouping, and the 10 mils refers to the 75% grouping. So essentially, this forecast is saying there's a 50% chance of 5 mils and only a 25% of 10 mils. And so, again, we're just trying to communicate what these numbers mean, and hopefully with that we build some trust and in the product. Now that's on the overview. If I actually went into 3-hourly forecast, we've got 3-hourly breakdown for Tuesday. I can actually expand Wednesday's view, and then when we look into the numbers, it's around this 4, mid-afternoon period that we see the chance of any rains skip up from 30-40%, and by 4 p.m, 7 p.m, when the front is coming through, we've got the most chance of rain. So, if you thought about this from, a daylight, imagine this was during the daylight hours, it might have implications for your spraying operations or just sort of general planning. So that information's 3 clicks from our homepage, but it does surprise me that not everybody, is aware of it. And if I went back up here, you've got your radar view as well. So again, if you were, using the analogy of laptop at the kitchen table, you could do a lot of your weekly planning straight from this. I'll just jump back into where I was. So yeah, that's Meti in a quick overview, and just those daily overviews and the 3-hourly forecasts that I'd encourage you to look at. So that talks about that 7-day period, and then we start to get into what we call our climate outlooks. So that's still dynamic physics-based forecast modelling, but it gives us the opportunity to look at multi-week totals and also the monthly outlooks. So again, I prepared this last week, but I'm just going to go right into the live data, as that will sort of allow us to look at where things are up to. Okay, so this is, again, I might as well go from the home page, just in case anyone isn't familiar with where I'm talking about. So if I was to go down, similar area to where the Meti was, there's just a link for seasonal outlooks, and we get to this home page. I'll go into the rainfall and temperature outlooks, but there is also a great function called the climate driver update. Again, if I think back to sort of 2005, this notion of thinking that, the general ag community would follow me when I'm talking about positive and negative Indian Ocean dipoles and southern annular modes and things like that. I mean, it just wasn't happening. Today, I'm really impressed at the level of knowledge that people have around these key drivers. And you can just see, one of the suggestions I give to people is, if you read it, take note of when the next one is issued. and set a reminder for yourself. It only takes a few moments of your day, but it just sort of keeps you on that conversation, and it just gives you the opportunity to pick up any trends. So you would have noticed that the negative Indian Ocean dipole event did come to fruition, and that is continuing. So that likely will see an increase in rainfall for southern and eastern Australia in that sort of late winter and spring period. I'll go back and look, and again, you can go into the Pacific Ocean. There is talk, some of the international models, including the bureaus, are pointing to a La Nina event, but that's very different to one actually establishing. So at this time of the year, we're just monitoring that, and you will get sort of commentary in this climate driver update on how that's progressing. So if I was to go back to the outlooks, so this was updated a few days ago, but when you go into rainfall, it's also important to note that these are issued every Thursday, but the 1 and the 2 week outlooks are updated every Monday. Okay, so if I was to click on the period for the 21st of August to the 3rd of September, you can see quite a strong signal for above average rainfall sort of through that northern New South Wales and southern Queensland. And as far as sort of you can drill into past accuracy if you want to sort of go back and look at sort of this period of the year and how our models cope with that sort of skill level. Go back to the summary. And the other thing I also find quite interesting is, let's go into your part of the world. Let's say, I know a lot of people are considering their nitrogen requirements this season. And let's say you sort of set yourself a threshold for 25 mils over a 2 week period, or let's say a month period, whatever it is. So we'll do 2 weeks because we're sort of on the cusp of. Okay, so you could go into here, drill right into your region, and then you could even just click where you are on the map, and it gives you this extra level of detail about the likelihood of those accumulated rainfall figures. I don't know if your screen's large enough to see that, but mine is still spinning and thinking. Doesn't come up. Oh, here we go. So the medium rainfall for this period at that location is around 29 mils. Okay, so that, when I showed this function to a grain grower group in southwest Western Australia, they were just blown away by this. You know, the fact that they can set their own parameters and decision thresholds, and then go and get this information. And then it also gives them, and I think this is the important thing, it gives you the opportunity to, assess the accuracy of this sort of information. So we've seen, I think, seasonal forecasts, certainly in the last sort of, I'd say, a year and a half, there has been a really strong performance from these seasonal outlooks. So I've just gone back into the data that I prepared last week, and at that stage you could see that I could get a nice figure for August as well, because it was the model run was back on the last few days of July. So whereas what I'm showing you today, that shifted because we're sort of 10 days into the month. And again, it's a good reason why, if you come back to this sort of information, weekly, or at the very least sort of when those monthly updates are done. So look, that leads into what I wanted to talk about some of the trends we're seeing on a larger scale. Mary or Jenny, have you had any questions come in yet?
No questions so far, Mike.
Okay, good. I'll keep going,
Yeah.
but stop me as you need to.
No worries, thanks.
Okay, so look, the next, I've got a few graphics in here, and I've referenced a document, the State of the Climate 2020, which is a quite an important read. It's a joint Bureau and CSIRO publication, and it's identified some really sort of key facts, including this marked decrease in April to October rainfall over the last 20 years in Southeast Australia. Look, this is quite relevant to our program, the agriculture program, because we just know how critical that is for a lot of you know, the key commodities out there. So this is impacting people, and what it also spurred us on to do is produce the climate guides, which were available or are still available through Climate Kelpie and also the Bureau's website. And from that, we've, I'll just go into a bit more detail. So we're sort of seeing this increased heat, and I think anyone around your region who, you know, was through that 2019, early 2020 with the bushfires and just that extreme heat, I think can understand this sort of trend that we have been seeing. And again, I'll go into a bit more detail with that. I pulled out a few case studies.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Mike, that Frank's got his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Frank. You just, if you can just come off mute, Frank. Look, I'll keep going just in case he's put his hand up for a cup of tea or something.
Yeah, no worries.
But jump in, Frank, if you find that mute button.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're just north of Braidwood, and we're on that plain between the coastal range and the Great Dividing Range.
Yep.
Now, I suppose in the last 20 years, the increased use of cloud seeding to produce snow for the snowfields and for irrigation water seems to have taken away our winter rain. Once upon a time, we used to get these rain-bearing flows that came up the eastern side of the Great Dividing Range and came up through that plain. I'm sure you're familiar with it, that area. And ever since they started intensive cloud seeding, that rain has gone. We now actually rely on East Coast lows for our rain. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, look, look, thanks for jumping in, Frank. It's really interesting, not only to hear what you're experiencing, but I guess your, you know, local assessment of that. I've just put this rainfall map back up, which shows, I guess, a few areas that have seen that such, you know, a marked reduction over that summer rainfall period. And, you know, you'd notice it's not just sort of where you are. So I would say that the you know, evidence where reduced winter rainfall and also late autumn, which again we know is critical, is you know, is really quite wide. I'm from northern New South Wales in the northwest of New South Wales, Frank, and we've seen sort of, while I guess the traditional northwest cloud bands that people sort of talk about historically, while they're not occurring each year, we are probably still fortunate enough to get what are called cut-off low pressure troughs, and they sort of get hung up on the ranges. So there's certainly, for every location in Australia, there are differences, and this is what this Climate Services for Agriculture project is clearly targeting, about giving people the information to better understand the climate they operate in. So as far as the cloud seeding, I don't know enough about that, but if again, just from this map, you just notice that it is quite extensive, you know, and obviously there's no cloud seeding going on in southwest WA, but they're still, experiencing significantly reduced winter rainfall. Interestingly, they're seeing quite increased summer rainfall, and that's for a part of the country that generally couldn't rely on summer rainfall. But yeah, look, great intel. Frank, you're the sort of person as well we'd love to probably spend some time chatting in more detail and just trying to understand, I guess, the complexity of that, the topography that you operate in.
Yeah, no worries.
So I'll just jump forward. So I was just about, and Frank, this will probably be interesting for you as well, hopefully, everyone. So these case studies are around rainfall. Now, I brought up Canberra Airport just because it's got a nice breakdown of the monthly figures. But the rainfall in autumn and spring has decreased, whereas the rainfall between in summer is up by around 10%. So this sort of data, again, is in the climate guides. And when we translate that across the climate services for agriculture, we'll allow people in multiple locations to really drill into their locality and just try to understand some of the trends that they're seeing on a seasonal and a monthly basis. I did the same for Micalago, which is, well, I don't need to tell you guys where that is, but the rainfall over the past 30 years in autumn has decreased by about 58 mils from 170 to 112, while there has been a slight increase again in spring and summer rainfall. So the lines that you can see there represent 30-year blocks. So on the left, that accumulation of yearly data equated to a average rainfall of 652 mils, whereas the last 30 years to 2020 has come down to 606. As far as autumn break goes, I've alluded to this before, but while a lot of the other seasons for your part of the world have remained reasonably stable, it's that autumn break and the reliability or lack thereof that really sort of stands out. When I've been, where was I? It was up in the North Queensland dry tropics. We had one producer give me their locality, and I just sort of typed it into the prototype that we're developing. And, they'd gone from, I think it was 63 to, 84 days above 35 degrees with a projection to kick up over 100 days. And, I said, what does that sound like what you're experiencing on the ground? And they're like, yeah, not only does it sound like we're experiencing, it's contributing to calf loss. There was a real tangible outcome to the business with these extra hot days for that location. So Canberra, just if again, I'm conscious that some of you are probably on small screens. So the red line indicates a running average of the number of days on average at Canberra Airport over 35 degrees, which has jumped up to an average of 7 days a year in this last 30-year period. And also since 1989, temperatures exceeding 40 degrees have been recorded at least 12 times, and in the previous 30 years to that, it was only 3 times. So we're seeing that sort of extreme heat starting to creep in. So the trends are set to continue. I mentioned to Mary and Jenny that I wanted to show you an early prototype of the climate services for agriculture, which is comes out of the Future Drought Fund. So about equipping producers with information that they can assess their risk. So before I get to that, does that brought up any more questions? Or I might wait actually till I get through to the prototype, and then we'll put some spot locations in. So out of the climate guides, and I'm actually, before I go there, I'm going to just check. Okay, so the regional weather and climate guides are available for these every natural resource area in Australia. And if I bring up the ACT one, if you haven't had a chance to look at this yet, I'd strongly encourage you to jump online, and I can provide the PDF as a document that Mary can perhaps send out after this. It just gives you a nice summary of what's happening, where to find additional information, you know, all targeted at challenging sort of how you think about climate and your business operation. So yeah, I'll leave that there. So after we did the climate guides, we went out and we asked people about what information is it that you need. It was pretty obvious that we learnt that farming is all about decision making, and timeframes are important. So we spoke about the operational, the access to radars, the tactical with the forecasts and choosing crop varieties and things like that. And then there's the strategic, which is the years to decades. It was very clear that wherever we landed, whoever we spoke to, farmers want to make informed decisions. But we also acknowledge that there's a trust issue there. We need to help producers along that journey of working out what information is reliable and relevant to them and how to sort of access that on a consistent basis. I've been as guilty in the past as anyone when you're living regionally that, if the Bureau's 7-day forecast isn't identifying, the rain that you're after, it can't hurt to have a sneaky peek at a few other sort of apps in the marketplace or, some of the model guidance that sort of is promising month and 2-month rainfall outlooks. But at times it's not helpful. You're better to have a consistent process where you go, you step through your process of understanding the information and making decisions on that. And look, collaboration is also the key. So when I spoke earlier on about our goal to help with agricultural production value, we understand that the way we can do that is to collaborate with, grower groups, advisors. We know that we need to help everybody get in the room, and there's an element of collaboration required. So the user feedback, we're working towards a centralized platform that will have a mobile element to it. Where we've learned that farmers are already adapting to the short-term opportunities, but not as much to long-term risk. So the climate guides in the next iteration in climate services for agriculture is that it's will need to be demonstrate the value of long-term climate information. So this is what the prototype will look like, and I'm going to go back to my browser, and I'm in the process of just clearing that I can share, because it's a prototype. I'm hoping to share the username and the password for this group, and yeah, just bear with me while I get clearance to do that. So this is, you can see the website up there. The goal today will be that I can give all that to Mary, but let me just type in a locality.
At work.
Okay, so I've just typed in Micalago for a bit of consistency from what I was doing earlier, and it's basically querying about 270 data sets. So there is a bit of spin up time. Okay, so as I said, this is an early prototype, but what we want to display clearly for people is we've got these three sections over here, and I don't know if hopefully you can see where my browser is, but we've got historical climate, which we've got benchmarked for the period 1960 to 1990. We've got what we're calling current climate, which is 1990 to 2020. So hopefully the way we've phrased that is the way that, you know, producers are familiar with that period they've been operating in. So, you know, like Frank mentioned, we know that you've been experiencing it. So that's why that period's been set. And then we've got the projections going forward. So again, if I show you Micalago, and if I was to click on this annual rainfall figure, it would take me down to this area with more detail. We can see each year's rainfall. So in 2020, obviously there was a return to more favourable conditions at 740 mils, but the sort of 4 years prior to that was sort of 360, 435, 552, and that blue bar is the 30-year average, running average, and that's 606 mils, as opposed, if I go back up to the dashboard view, 652. So this is the sort of information that we want to go out and test with producers to see if that's useful information, if it's being displayed clearly. The goal is to have the 5 main commodities for each region. So if this is again just an example, so if you're sort of growing wheat in the Riverina, you'd have your growing season data, your fallow season, and your heat risk with a threshold set at 34 degrees. Now we understand that would be very different if you're growing capsicums in North Queensland, but we're confident that the dashboard and this platform will have the capability to do all that. So I think, look, I'll leave it at that. I think as questions come in, I can come back to this or the seasonal outlooks and get more location specific. But I might hand back to Jeni, and you can, open the floor up.
Thanks, Mike. That's very interesting, and you know, like it's great to know that there's so much resources out there already. But to know that you're working on this prototype is very exciting, and another digital platform to use. So if anyone does have any questions, Elizabeth, you've got your hand up. Do you just want to unmute yourself and throw your question to Mike?
Yes, first, Mike, thanks very much. That's really helpful. I didn't realise how far along the current climate info had got. So my question for you is, as part of this development project that you're working on now, are you looking to connect the BOMS data for the actual weather to the projections that are coming out of the Departments of Environment and so on, so we can look a bit further into the future?
Yeah, Elizabeth. So the next stage of climate services for agriculture will be to incorporate seasonal outlooks. But at this stage, I think your question related to sort of near-time weather, and that at this stage that sort of will remain, you know, the Bureau app and the Bureau website for that daily sort of information.
I actually meant more like much longer term. So like we've got climate projections for 2030, 2050, 2070, that sort of time frame. So essentially, can we link the wider environmental climate change, climate science with the Bureau's observations, so we can get a history as well as a projection looking forward?
Yeah, sure. Sorry. Yeah, so I should have said, so Climate Services for Agriculture is a joint CSIRO and Bureau project, and it's very much working on those sort of data sets. So the projections go back to, in fact, I can even, hang on, I'll just, yeah. So for example, projected data if you go in there, you can sort of understand where the national projection data set comes from and the sort of grids and resolution that we're working with. So I think that's all. Again, if I've interpreted your question correctly, I believe that's all being considered. Yes.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. That was great. Is there anyone else that wants to throw a question up? I know it can be overwhelming when you look at the tools and the platforms that are already out there. So Mike, it's been really good to actually for you to explain it on the screen for us as well today. I found that very handy, and it's it's always nice and good to play with some new tools. So I guess if you do get that permission for us to send out the login and the password for people to have a go and provide feedback, that would be really good. But obviously we'll wait for you to confirm that.
Yeah, look, I'm sure that won't be an issue, and yeah, it'd be really good just to sort of get any feedback, particularly around sort of the usability and just the clarity that we're going for.
Great.
Is there another? Sorry, Jenny. Is there another location? I noticed I've picked one in New South Wales, but is there somewhere west of your region, or again, just so I can show people how it sort of may differ?
Well, I think you did throw up Tharwa, but if you wanted to put in YAS, Y-A-S-S, there's quite a few participants online that in that area, if you like.
Okay.
And I think we've got a question from Anna Van Dugden, if you want to unmute.
Okay, got it. Okay. I guess I was going to just ask you if you could use the that platform that you've got up there now to sort of mix it up a bit and try different commodities and different locations, which it sounds like you're going to do, which is great to give people more of an indication of.
Yeah, absolutely, Anna. Yeah, that's the goal. So it needs to be usable for everyone. If we're going to, obviously the agriculture sector more broadly has some pretty ambitious goals at the moment with production, and that's going to require all producers to sort of manage their climate risk. And there's already been some fantastic examples. Like we've worked with producers in southern Queensland, northern New South Wales that are really coming up with practical solutions to the climate they work in. In southern Queensland, we had a cattle producer explain to us that they just weren't getting the spring rainfall that they'd been getting historically, and what it meant for them, rather than sort of trying to reinvent the wheel back at the home property, that they took their core stud breeding cows south to the northern New South Wales, where they could get that sort of really strong pasture growth in spring, and then the weaners would go back. This was a stud bull operation with a bit of extra weight in them, and then they could set up the home property to finish sort of the job off that way. So to me, that just sounded like a really interesting way how people are sort of taking this information and quantifying what it means for them. We had another producer in northwest New South Wales that when you sort of I should have mentioned there's evapotranspiration data as well. So when they assess their sort of heat days, rainfall issues, evapotranspiration, they just couldn't rely on surface water. So the property had been very reliant on a network of dams, and they just explained how it became a very obvious business decision to sort of seek groundwater for that operation. And this was a few years ago, right in the middle of the drought in 2019. But yeah, just really interesting how people sort of are adapting and needing to adapt.
It's really interesting to hear the scenarios and the stories already coming out of the tools, Mike. That's fantastic. Joe, I think you've got a question. You've got your hand up there. Joe, would you like to unmute yourself and ask Mike?
Yes, hi. Sorry, I'm not sure if I missed this when I was talking about with you. Scroll back to the picture you had up before of the graphs, the dashboard. Yeah, that one there. Is that data there generic? So this is what the trend is, or is that specifically the future for the next 12 months?
Okay, yeah, great question, Joe, and I probably just need to clarify that. So over here on the left, so this, can you see that figure of 695?
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the average annual rainfall for the 30 years up until 1990.
Yep.
Then the current climate, that's the 672. This is at YAS, are the actual figures for average rainfall for the subsequent 30 years. So that's 1991 to 2020.
Yep.
And then this is where we get into the projection area. So if I kick that out to 2050, you've got, you know, a best estimate on projections at 672 for YAS. And then you've got your breakdowns of the seasonal rainfall as well. It's nothing to do with the projections on the next 12 months of rainfall, because I think what you are alluding to there is, you know, if we brought in our seasonal outlooks,
Yep.
and we're saying, okay, there's an above average chance of rain for, you know, the 3-month period into November, and again, I'll just scroll in. So, okay, looking at above average rainfall for YAS up until November, no, the platform is not looking at the seasonal influence, because it's trying to get people to understand future projections, which is different. I mean, while we've got a high degree of confidence for this period, it won't help the you know, an extra 120 mils over 3 months to November is going to make very little difference if we go into the next prolonged dry period, which you know, we don't know when that will be.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. How are we going with questions? We got any more?
Look, Jenny, if people you know, are more comfortable asking sort of in whatever forum that you guys sort of have reached out to people, feel free to shoot them to me over the next few days, and I can get back to people as well.
Yep. All right, and you'll also we'll get that summary document off you, and we can circulate that around and log in passwords if that's possible, and also we'll just add your contact details on if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great.
Yeah, no worries. I think we've got one more question. Mary, or is it?
Question from Alex about whether this information was used for firefighting and other emergency services. Is that right, Alex?
Alex, you're just on mute if you are.
Yes, sorry.
You're up.
Yeah, it sounds like yes, that was the question. Yeah, look, I probably suffer a little bit from post-traumatic stress when I think back to the 2019, 2020 fires, because I was part of the you know, the response to that. Certainly leading into a summer like we had. Absolutely, these seasonal outlooks are critical. So the Bureau actually have embedded meteorologists at a lot of the emergency services, and certainly when things were sort of at their worst for the ACT, you know, we flew in one of our top meteorologists for that purpose. But yes, even leading in to the season, hazard reduction, all that sort of thing. Absolutely, this is the sort of real baseline stuff that a lot of the emergency services just simply rely on. And it's not restricted to fire agencies either. We've got staff embedded in the SES and other services, and obviously as you're going, you know, as it looks like we could be heading towards an above average rainfall period through in spring, you know, that's going to have implications too for you know, the SES and coastal activities.
Fantastic. Mike, there's just another question we've got from Stephen, and it's, do you show delta? Not sure whether we need a little bit more explanation around that one, or if you might know what he's after.
Yeah, look, I think he's just referring to the statistical sort of elements of this. Most of our products will have, you know, if you go into sort of, for example, the information, you'll get sort of the model outlooks, and then you can actually go into the detail in more detail. So I think I even had one up here. So this is this is completely publicly available. So in the same way I sort of you know, clicked off the home page to get into the seasonal outlooks. One more click and you're into the this sort of level of detail about bias correction, scaling, and then you can go right throughout the variables. So I think that's what's being referred to there.
Fantastic. And Alex, just to answer your question, we'll collate whatever information we've got access to, and Michael will be able to provide us, and we'll send it straight to you, and you'll be able to share that with your farming community. So we'll get that done in the next couple of days.
Well, look, thanks for having me, and yeah, it's certainly always interesting to listen to the sort of questions that come in, and yeah, if there's follow up, don't hesitate, Jeni, to flick them across.
Yeah, no worries, Mike. That sounds fantastic. Look, really appreciate your time this afternoon. It's been extremely interesting and very exciting to see where the prototype goes and engaging with it. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us as well. As we mentioned, we'll send out to you as much information as we can gather, documents and the recording, so then you can, you know, engage with your network and community as well. But it's been a great afternoon. We hope you've all enjoyed it. We are always interested in feedback, good, bad, or ugly, on our webinars. And if there's any topics that you are wanting us to cover, then just give us an email or a call, and we'll be able to send you all our details, so you can do that as well. But thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mary, for managing the registrations and the chat function. It's been great, and just thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thanks, team. Catch you next time.
Hey, is that you, Elizabeth? Oh, she's gone.